rain started suddenly, as it often does in late October. Large, heavy drops lashed against the asphalt, turning it into a black mirror where the reflections of streetlights and neon signs trembled. I stood under the canopy of the Centaur bar, wrapping myself in a thin autumn coat that felt useless against the raw wind chilling me to the bone. What a fool. I should have dressed warmer. I saw the weather forecast this morning. The last customers had left half an hour ago, leaving behind the smell of beer, tobacco, and cheap cologne. I wiped the tables, arranged the chairs, and counted the earnings under the watchful eye of Vasily, the weary bartender. Now that the work was over, exhaustion hit me. That specific, heavy fatigue that accumulates after a 12-hour shift on your feet. Go on, yo. Why are you still hanging around? Vazia said as he locked the door. Your man will meet you. Look at that downpour. He was supposed to, I muttered, instinctively reaching for my phone. The screen remained black despite my insistent pressing of the button. Damn. My battery had died after lunch, and in the rush of orders, I had forgotten to charge it. Now, the result: no calls, no way to order a taxi through the app. A message from Andre had come during the day while the phone still showed signs of life. Sent on an urgent 3-day business trip to St. Petersburg. Can't meet you. Take a taxi. I'll send money. Love you. Warm words, but they offered little comfort now. It was nearly midnight, raining, and I was on a deserted street on the outskirts of the city. Home was a good 40-minute drive away. Buses came once an hour, if at all. I sighed, popped my collar, and stepped out from under the shelter. The cold rain immediately began its work, soaking my hair and trickling down my neck. I trudged toward the bus stop. The street was empty. Only rare cars sped by, splashing me with dirty spray. And then, as if in answer to my silent prayer, a yellow silhouette appeared in the distance. The car moved slowly, unhurriedly, as if looking for someone. On its roof sat a rectangular sign with flickering red letters, "Taxi." A wave of relief washed over me. Without thinking, I threw up my hand and stepped to the edge of the roadway. The headlights blinded me for a brief moment, but the car smoothly pulled up and stopped, its old wipers screeching against the glass. The door opened with a dull creak. Good evening. Get in, beautiful, before you're soaked through. Where to? A raspy voice with a slight Eastern accent drifted from the cabin. I scrambled inside, slamming the door. The interior met me with warm, stale air smelling of tobacco soot, sweat, and something else, Swedish and musty, like the basement of an old house. But it didn't matter. The main thing was that it was warm and dry, and this old bucket of bolts would whisk me home. Oh, thank you so much. You really saved me. The weather is a nightmare. To Stroidley Street, House 45, third entrance, please. The driver nodded, shifting gears. The car, an old Volga the color of egg yolk, moved smoothly. In the glow of the dashboard, I caught a glimpse of him. A squat, thick-set man in his 50s with a bushy black mustache and hair graying at the temples. Heavy rings glinted on his thick fingers. When he turned to look back, gold crowns flashed on several of his teeth. His smile was wide, even welcoming. You don't see many people out in this weather, he said, returning his gaze to the road. Do you work nearby? Yes, at the bar. I answered shortly, trying not to breathe too deeply. The smell in the car was thick. It enveloped me like a second skin. The driver shook his head. Hard work. People are drunk, probably pestering you. Sometimes. I looked out the window at the familiar streets passing by. The rain turned the world into a blurry watercolor landscape. Streetlights stretched into yellow streaks. Shop windows dissolved into colored spots. Don't be afraid, girl. I'll get you there fast. He smirked into the rearview mirror again. The car turned off the main street toward my district, but for some reason, it took an unfamiliar route through dim back alleys. I became nervous almost immediately. I think we're going the wrong way. There's a traffic jam tonight. Road repairs. The taxi driver waved it off carelessly. I know a shortcut. Don't worry. I nodded, but a nervous residue stirred deep inside me. A few minutes passed before I could pull myself together. Fatigue, nerves, the darkness outside. My imagination was playing tricks on me. I looked out the window again. The landscape seemed wrong. The houses were losing their definition. Their edges blurred as if I were seeing them through thick, muddy water or fog glass. The familiar supermarket on the corner seemed shrouded in haze. Its bright sign glowed dimly now, like a dying star. It's cold, beautiful. I can turn up the heater, the taxi driver said. No, it's fine. I replied, feeling goosebumps crawl down my spine, not from the cold. I glanced stealthily at the driver. He sat there, swaying slightly to the rhythm of the car. His thick fingers drummed on the steering wheel. Suddenly, he went silent. Not just stopped talking, but went absolutely quiet. Even his loud, wheezing breath vanished. A silence so deep it made my ears ring settled in the cabin. Only the howling wind outside and the rustle of tires on wet asphalt remained. Unconsciously, I raised my eyes to the rearview mirror and froze. In the mirror, in the darkness of the back seat, sat silhouettes, vague, blurred like shadows cast by a flickering flame. They sat motionless, staring straight ahead, but I felt the weight of their gaze on me. I turned my head with difficulty. The back seat was empty. Only my bag lay there, just as it had been. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked in the mirror again. They were there, the same silhouettes. Now clearer, as if someone was sitting very close to me, almost touching, but in reality, they weren't there. One silhouette had a neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Another seemed to be crying, face buried in hands. A third just looked straight at me from the mirror world, and in its eye sockets was nothing but emptiness. "Are you comfortable?" the taxi driver suddenly asked. His voice sounded so close, as if he had leaned right into my ear. I flinched, pressing myself against the door. "What? Yes, I'm fine. Good." He smiled into the mirror again. The gold teeth looked like a snarl. "We'll be there soon." But we didn't arrive. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours that shouldn't have existed. The road outside lost all landmarks. Occasionally, silhouettes of buildings flashed by, but they weren't the houses of my city. They were grim, gray structures with empty window sockets and crooked roofs reaching into a leaden sky. Sometimes, figures stood on the roadside, motionless, facing the road. I felt their invisible eyes following the car. "Where are we?" My voice came out thin and alien. "On the road, beautiful." "Where else?" the driver replied. He no longer looked in the mirror. He stared straight ahead, his face becoming stony and motionless, devoid of its fake friendliness. I want to get out." "Stop, please." "Can't stop here, beautiful. It's not allowed. Lots of mean people out at night. Dangerous to wander alone." There wasn't a hint of flattery in his voice, only a cold, iron statement of fact. And that smile, that same gold smile, was frozen on his face like a painted mask. "Stop right now," I shouted, grabbing the door handle. It wouldn't budge, as if welded shut. The taxi driver slowly turned his head toward me. Not his whole body, just his head. It turned at an unnatural angle. His neck cracked loudly, like dry twigs. The sound echoed in my mind. "Shut up and sit still," he said, all traces of his kind intonation gone. "We're almost there." I recoiled, my back against the door. Panic, sharp and uncontrollable, rose in my throat. Not knowing how to react, I closed my eyes tight. "Julia, breathe, just breathe. This is a nightmare. This is a dream from exhaustion," I told myself. But the cold of the seat, the smell of rot and dust increasing by the second, it was all terrifyingly real. This wasn't just a kidnapping. This was something else, something wrong, something unnatural. I looked at the driver, at his thick hands on the wheel. My gaze drifted down. I saw his feet, or rather, what was in place of his feet. There, where there should have been cheap sneakers or boots, was something else. Something dark, covered in short, bristly hair. And at the ends, not feet, but hard, black, cloven hooves. They pressed against the pedals, and each movement made not a metallic sound, but a dull, bone-like thud. I blinked and stared again. The reality was brutal. My God, those are real hooves. The world collapsed into a single point of chilling horror. All the strangeness, the blurred city, the shadows in the mirror, the endless road, merged into one monstrous picture. This wasn't a taxi, it was a trap. I wasn't in a car with a quirky driver. I was in a cage with the devil. The icy hammer of realization struck my chest. In my head, the image of those goat hooves swirled, the stuff of nightmares and my grandmother's scary stories. Tales of a power that roams the outskirts of the world, picking up lost souls. A taxi to nowhere. A taxi that picks up those who have let down their guard and carries them away until they are utterly spent. Those silhouettes in the mirror, they must be the souls of people he had driven to their end. Suddenly, a memory flashed, bright as a flare. My grandmother's voice, quiet, yet as clear as it was in my childhood. She had grown up in a remote village and knew every omen, every charm, every story of what walks the world besides men. Sitting in the kitchen over evening tea, she would tell me, "Remember, Yelenka, the unclean ones are dangerous, but sometimes they are foolish. They live outside our time. If one pester you, if one won't let go, tell them, 'Come yesterday.' It throws them into confusion. They cannot stand the contradiction. They'll run away like they've been struck." At 10 years old, I had laughed, imagining wood spirits scratching their heads in confusion. How can I come yesterday? Now, those words were the only straw in a storming sea of hopelessness. The car raced along an absolutely empty road, straight as an arrow, heading into black void. On either side lay a lifeless wasteland dotted with crooked, bare trees that looked like skeletons of giants. The taxi driver spoke again, his voice returning to a nearly human tone, but now it held a greasy, unhealthy sweetness. "Do you like riding with me, beautiful? We could see each other more often. I could take you wherever you want, to beautiful places." "Well, what do you say? Great, right?" He turned around. He really turned around, his vertebrae creaking horribly. His neck stretched, becoming unnaturally long with thick, bulging veins. His smile stretched to his ears, revealing rows of small, sharp, yellow fish-like teeth. His skin had become smooth and white, stretched like parchment. His small, deep-set eyes glowed with a dull yellow light, like a nocturnal predator. The world spun. I felt sick. One last attempt to pull myself together. I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms. The sharp pain helped me gather the remnants of my will. I straightened up, looked directly into those yellow eyes, and said clearly, enunciating every word as my grandmother had taught me, "Come yesterday." The effect was instantaneous. The sly smile slid off the taxi driver's face like a mask. His features twisted into a wild, raw amazement mixed with rage. He jerked his head back, another crack echoing. "What? What did you say?" I felt my cheeks flush with adrenaline. A moment later, I repeated it louder, more confident. "Come yesterday." The driver's face contorted. It began to change, losing all human traits. The skin darkened, cracking with wrinkles. The mustache shriveled into bristles. His eyes flared with a hellish crimson fire. A non-human roar erupted, full of such frantic malice that the car windows rattled. The Volga's engine screamed, and it lunged forward with such force that I was thrown back into the seat. The world outside became a blurred streak of darkness. The car tossed from side to side, racing along a road that now twisted and looped as if entering unknown dimensions. The cabin filled with the stench of sulfur and burning. The shadows in the back seats stirred, agitated, reaching out with shapeless limbs but seemingly afraid to come closer. The driver, now barely resembling a man, gripped the wheel with long, bony fingers and filthy claws. He muttered, grinding his teeth, his words in a language that doesn't exist. I huddled in the seat, repeating like a mantra, "Come yesterday. Come yesterday." I was afraid that if I stopped, I would lose this fragile shield. Suddenly, there was a sharp, piercing shriek of brakes. The car spun in place. I was jerked hard by a seatbelt I hadn't even noticed before. Silence. We were standing at the very same bus stop where I had entered the car. The rain was still drizzling, lit by the same streetlight. The familiar sign of the Centaur bar was visible 20 meters away. The passenger door clicked open. I didn't think. Instinct took over and threw me out of the cabin onto the wet asphalt. I didn't look back. I didn't check for my bag. I just ran. I ran like I had never run in my life, feeling the cold air burn my lungs while my heart felt ready to leap out of my chest. Only after running 100 meters, tripping over a curb and nearly falling, did I dare to turn around. The street was empty. No yellow Volga, no tire tracks on the wet asphalt. Only the rain, quietly drumming on the roofs. And a lone dog, huddling in a nearby alley. I reached home with a staggering gait. My hands shook so much it took 3 tries to fit the key into the lock. Once inside, I bolted every lock, put on the chain, propped a heavy chair against the door, and then turned on every light I could find. I huddled in the corner of the sofa, covered with a blanket over my head. A fine tremor racked my body, not subsiding until morning. I didn't sleep, listening to every sound in the house, the creak of the laminate, the noise of water in the pipes. I kept imagining that through the window, in the darkness, a flash of yellow would appear and a red neon sign would light up. Taxi. But nothing happened. In the morning, when the first rays of the sun painted the sky pale pink, the shaking finally stopped. I went to the window. The street lived its usual life. Cars drove by, people rushed to work. The world was sharp and real again. 3 days later, Andre returned. Unable to hold it in, I threw myself around his neck and burst into tears, telling him the disjointed story of the taxi, the rain, and the hooves. He listened, stroked my hair, and told me it was just a nightmare, hallucinations from overwork. He convinced me to see a doctor and take some light sedatives. Gradually, the vividness of the memory began to fade. I tried my hardest to convince myself it was nonsense, justifying it with rational explanations. Darkness, fatigue, stress, an old car with an unusual pedal. The fear did eventually recede, replaced by a vague unease, and then just a general anxiety. I needed that. The paranoia was interfering with my life, suffocating me like a scratchy scarf. However, I no longer walk in the dark, and I call a taxi very rarely, and only through the app.